All right, hello everybody. We're back with the Brush House Critique session. I got Adam and Jess here with me today, and the theme is Altar of Ages. I believe it's like a time altar keeper. Yeah, it's something like that.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be long. There's a lot of entries.
Yeah. And Tyler, if you can, please cut me off if I ramble, because I always end up eating into that timeline. So just shut me up if I go on too much.
I'm gonna have the stopwatch on, folks, and I hate to interrupt people. I always get heck for it, but we have to keep these moving. All right, first up, Anakin. This is cool. This is well rendered. I like this.
Yeah, I really like this one.
This is well referenced. The lighting's good.
And poster art style, which I really like that. I love that culture. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has a nice mood to it. Like, it feels very, like, consistent in the feeling of it. The color choices and everything, really pleasant. The gold against the purple.
Yeah, it really balances nicely. I'd say just in terms of your values, to get a little bit more of, if you want to keep that dark silhouette to the character and his clothing, which is nice because it kind of adds a little bit of mood to it, just to separate a bit of that staircase because the blacks are kind of blending into each other. Maybe you need to calibrate your monitor for that. Maybe it just might be that.
Yeah, like right around the stairway and shoulders.
Yeah.
Needs a step.
And I feel like it kind of goes to flat black, maybe a little too readily, in too many different places. So I feel like there's it's flattening it out where you're getting too much of that flat black. Like on the hat, I think in certain areas it's not important. Like in the arm that's coming out to the side, some of that is okay to lose, but some of the parts around the focal point, specifically like face and the goggles, you don't want those to go flat.
Yeah.
Definitely in here.
And I think the hand holding the stopwatch as well gets flattened because you go to black so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And you can build up a lot more like three-dimensionality with just using temperature shifts instead of drastically dropping the value.
Yeah.
I'll weigh in with 2 points, and then we'll move on with this one. I watched the edges. Some of these edges are fine, but there's instances like around the stairway and everything, like right here, the edges become very janky looking, like very digital looking, like they're too like cutout-ish, and on the character as well. The last thing is an optional thing, but if it were my piece personally, I would ditch these trees or this whatever this is on the side. I would just lose it. It doesn't need it.
Yeah, because it two-dimensionalizes everything a little bit. Although it gives it a bit of that poster feel, but maybe to add a little bit more form and dimension, or take them out, depending on which way you want to go with it.
Great.
And I would also suggest, to talk over you real quickly, is just to soften some of that stuff in the background a little bit, so it's not quite so sharp feeling. Yeah,
because it's competing a bit with everything else. Yeah, it's true.
Art person.
Really nice, though, man. Really pretty solid. All right. Well, I love the feeling I get from this. Whoever painted this has a very pure soul, and I love that. I love the fearlessness with the colors. I love the fact that you're not afraid of color. That shows a lot of courage as an artist. I don't know about what you guys think, but I'm feeling maybe a bit heavy on the saturation overall. Maybe some softer grays or something like that.
It needs more neutrals to balance it out.
Yeah.
So like, just add that punch, right, to a few places.
Yeah.
That you really want it.
Particularly the skin tones. When you have skin tones that are oversaturated, everybody notices it. You can get away with a little bit in the dress because it could just be a bright colored dress, but the skin tones, if they're too orangey, it generally tends to make things feel a little bit off. So yeah.
I think for me, the thing that I'm having the most trouble with is just the design of the hourglass coming out of her back.
Yeah. I don't understand.
I didn't know that's what it was.
I'd almost like to see it like designed in a way that felt more integral to the shape of her, as opposed to like it looks like it's like stabbing her in the back or jutting out of her back. Something to indicate that it's actually supposed to be a part of her. Like, just play with the design a little bit more of that, and I think it could be really interesting. I like that there's like, it looks like a little seed or something growing in there, which is a really interesting like tie back to the tree that she's interacting with.
You know what you could actually do, Jessica? She could have it strapped to the front in this kind of like case and have a baby floating in it. That idea was already, never mind. That idea was already taken. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah, it's a design that needs.
Death Stranding joke, all right? Jesus, I'm not a comedian. Give me a break here.
It's a design that needs iteration because it's not working as one of you said. You didn't even realize that it is very hard to tell, and yeah, I would definitely revisit that concept of it. Play more neutrals out, and you'll be in good shape because this has got a lovely feeling and it's got a lovely mood to it. The character does feel like underfinished though. It feels very rough around the edges. You'd want to bring some reference and research into the hair, into this dress. Maybe give that dress a bit of design. A little one-dimensional in that regard. But yeah, great submission.
Yeah.
I do feel like the composition is fighting with me a little bit as well. You've got this very like graphic repetition of these beads on the tree, and the tree looks more like graphic design than it does realism, which kind of tells me, okay, so you're going for this very asymmetrical graphic design type composition, but then you have these faded trees in the background, which are telling me that you're trying to build an immersive scene, which is contradicting the graphic design quality.
Yeah, I would even take the trees out. The background tree, just to keep that graphic statement, because that's where the illustration side of it comes in. You've got that style, right?
Well put.
Yeah, for sure.
Adrian, welcome.
No, a lot of storytelling. Adrian never ever misses. Has Adrian ever missed a submission?
This is I don't think this can be that Adrian, because I never know the last name first of all, but it feels very different.
Two A's.
It feels way too different.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, it does. It's true.
I don't think this. I think it's a different Adrian.
With two A's. Well, it's possible. It's not common in North America at least, but very interesting style. I'm really digging the style. I'm thinking anatomically. Look up reference the anatomy, because I really love the graphics. I love that style, that graphic kind of edgy style. That's really I come from an animation background, so I really respect that. But anatomically, it's all over the place, right? The arms are kind of like disjointed, and the legs are the legs are okay. The foot looks more like an animal foot.
It's the hands up there. It's the foot right here, Adam.
Yes. All right.
Yep.
All right.
And I do think that the figures on the far side of the canvas are much better executed than figure in the throne, which, considering that he's like the focal point, he needs to be even better than they are. But I think that the grouping of the figures on the side is really well done. And even the gesture of the figure going out the door is really interesting and pleasantly designed. I like that. I am feeling like an emptiness in the composition on the far side where there aren't people. And I'm almost wondering if you were to create like maybe another foreground level where we were seeing like the shoulders and heads of maybe a few people there that kind of that space up a little bit.
Yeah.
All right, I'll weigh in, and then I don't get timekeeper or alter of ages so much from this. So the problem for me starts on the narrative level, and then it ends with the whole composition and shot design. I don't think it's that great or what's serving your idea the best. And that's going to start on a structural level where you have a 3D. So if your 3D model angle, if the shot itself is bland and boring in there, it's going to translate, unfortunately, to the painting and the color side.
Product,
because none of that's working for me, at least. It's just an angle. And a lot of it comes to what you guys said, like the characters, the positioning, the foreground here. But none of this looks designed. Like, what is this wall? Is this somebody's basement? Is this in a cave? It needs like a lot of work and a lot more put into the idea in terms of what this is and how it works. So it's very one-dimensional in the execution on it on that side.
Yeah, like to add to that too, I would say think of your camera, the camera itself as a person, a viewer. It's an audience member of this. So how you place it is kind of taking a human being's perspective or an animal's perspective or a cockroach's perspective. That'll give you a little bit more creative focus on how you use that camera angle. It'll help a lot for sure.
And one last thing is I think you're lacking overlap and visual flow that could make this more interesting. Like those figures in the corner are probably one of the most interesting parts of the image. And I think part of that is the way that they're overlapping that bright doorway. Whereas the window on the other side is completely isolated and doesn't have anything connecting it to the rest of the image.
Yeah, but I do love that style. I really honestly, keep going in that direction style-wise because
all right. We're at binging
really
Adam, I'm cutting you off.
We're
running late.
Thank you, Tyler.
I'm the bad guy. I'm sorry,
okay.
everybody.
Fighting Baxter Dexter. And
This is
okay,
epic.
well, this gets right to the point. Okay, I'm going to jump in right away. I love the composition. I might have brought that character on the platform a little bit closer, just to kind of bring them more into proximity. You're stretching the canvas out a lot, but we need to silhouette that, or we need to create some more contrast in that character on the platform, because on my screen, that character is getting completely lost in the black sky and the thing. We can barely see it. So make sure to create some contrast so we can read that.
Adam,
cliff.
on that note, this is distracting as well, how it's too perfectly in line with this shape, because that's like a major shape, and the character, like, it's drawing it to it, but it also is like, it's a tangent at the same time for me, in a weird way.
Move it back, frame it. Yeah, you can move it behind the character to kind of frame them into the shot, right?
I'm having trouble mostly, I think, with the edges. I feel like it's going like sharp, blurry, like very much so in both directions, but at very weird places. Like these rings in the sky are reading as super sharp, crisp edges, whereas the figure is like blurry and cloudy, but not in a way that makes her feel like ephemeral, but it feels like she's just not finished.
It feels like an intent thing, like it technique. I agree.
Yeah.
The color is a little all over the place too in the saturation department. Like it's just, I get like it has like the supernova type of feel, but I mean there's huge pops of green, orange, yellow. I try to like approach that same idea with a little bit more subtlety. Like these shapes down here become like distracting a bit too. Like I think it's part of the edges, like sharp edges, soft edges, it's a little all over the place in that regard.
Well, think of an edge like focus, right? Think of it like focusing something. If you're taking a picture of somebody's face and the eye's in focus, you're focusing on the eye. If the ear's blurry, you're not focusing on the ear. So think of it, it's that sharpness and contrast is creating a focal point for your viewer. So if the main character, this demigod, is a big focal point, she should be in focus. Otherwise, you're kind of pulling attention away from her, making her seem less important, right?
But
one thing too is that the position of the hourglass and the rock that it's on, like directly following her arm, like I want to see it like away from her more or overlapping in some way, as opposed to like perfectly framing it, because that's flattening it.
Yeah.
All right, Ben. Next up.
Ben, this has got that. I've been playing Zelda with my son lately. He's completely obsessed with it, and this brings me right back to Zelda, man. So respect for that, just for making me think about Zelda right there. But this is pretty.
I like the lighting and actually the colors with this. I think the narrative is a little on the loose end in terms of what the theme was looking for. But for me, the major thing is a lot of it's just like really muddy in terms of the edge control and the quality of the brushwork. It feels like there's a lack of control for me on a lot of those elements. But yeah, there's some good hits and misses for me. What do you guys think?
I would tie this character in with the environment. Like what you've done is you've taken I think the design of the character in that disc really kind of sets a good stage for the fact that there's a magical side to this, and there might be a time thing to it. But tie this character narratively into the scene rather than it just being character and a winter landscape. We want to see why he's there. Maybe there's some kind of destination, or he's found a portal or something that kind of ties it in so we know why he's there, right? But illustration-wise, that feeling, the painting side of it, like Tyler said, it needs a little bit of polish. But the painting and the lighting and the composition, I love that. It's got a bit of a Lord of the Ringsy vibe that I really, really dig. So just give it a bit more purpose.
I think
he's done a really nice job balancing the colors. But I think that one of the things that's throwing me off a little bit is just how low in the composition he is. And also like the way that rock is just above his head. I almost want to see him just push enough that his head overlaps that rock, and then it'll like put him in front of the rock better, and he won't be smushed into the bottom half of the composition quite as much.
Yeah, I agree. And it'll also cancel the rock out, making that what Tyler identified as the altar, make that altar more noticeable, because right now it's the head, rock, and altar, so we get these three brown spots that kind of compete with each other. So doing what Jessica said would make us look at the altar because he would be blocking the rock, right?
Yeah.
And then yeah, just like I feel like it feels unfinished, especially on like the figure's head and hair and clothing. And a lot of that is just edges. And so like moving him up and then just really bringing that top of his head into focus and making sure the edge control is really good there will help bring him forward as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a nice piece. I really like this.
Yeah.
All right, Alex.
You want to play Zelda?
I'm always in the mood to play Zelda. All right.
All right. So if it's a girl, you're going to call her Zelda?
My wife's already got names on both sides picked out, so she has to run them through me. That works easier for us.
Zelda?
That's why I don't have to come up with like a load of names. See, this is what we talk about. This is what we talk about a lot that we don't see of. A lot of like attention to shot design where it kind of places us into the scene rather as observers of the scene. It's still like slightly far away, but I mean I like it though. Like we're boots on the ground. I'm in this shot and I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. Now here's the thing: the creature, this steampunk kind of futuristic yet ancient creature with all these time rings. You've sold me on that. And the ring, the portal and the offering, storytelling and composition is you nailed it.
I agree.
But the main character, this pose, there's something very off about the head looks a little small. Like if that's the focal point, regardless of everything else in the shot, the payoff is that character holding the offering, and you didn't quite nail the silhouette of that character, and that's what we're going to notice first. So that's where I'd put my attention for sure.
Speaking of the characters, I noticed in that one thumbnail off to the side, you have multiple figures in that foreground that creates this really nice depth of field. And I kind of wish that had made it into the final version of the painting, because I think that adds something to the image. Whereas right now, that whole bottom half of the image feels like empty space. And the figures in that thumbnail give it more context and make it more visually interesting.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. It's too much waste.
Yeah, something to pull our eye from the foreground to the background. Not only that, but I also noticed something I really liked that kind of made me think of Dark Souls for some reason. I don't know why. But the snow there's actually snow coming in. I would push that. I would add more snow, and that would kind of pull our eye into the foreground a little bit more, because I like that idea. It just wasn't clear enough. But that's very clever, having snow coming in. Yeah.
The other thing is watch the materials. Like I can tell you used a really good 3D base on there, but your painting of those materials in terms of the application, it's way too transparent. Like this, this doesn't feel or look like metal. It more resembles something like plastic. The same with these rings as well. Like you could just see that 3D geometry in them rather than how this light in the scene is affecting them as a material like a metal or gold or a brass or something. So it's too obvious in that regard. And the other thing is I love the design of the character and the clothing and stuff, but same thing, the lighting, it does not show me enough of what we're seeing kind of there, like the subtle color transitions and stuff. It's like too one-dimensional.
Yeah.
But yeah, good design.
This is a really cool piece.
Sorry, Jessica, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Oh, likewise. No, I was just saying it was a really cool piece. I think that the creature design and everything is just really well done. Really visually interesting.
Yeah.
Hey, folks, we're back. We're up with round 2. We got Courtney's here. Thanks for submitting, Courtney.
Yes.
So we got a turtle. We got some statue element. The hourglass. Okay, so this is the bottom of the hourglass. See, I think I wouldn't have necessarily connected all those elements if I weren't like reading straight through the reference like 100%. And a lot of the problem for me is the composition design and such, right? We're set really far away, as we usually talk about. There's a lot of weird border elements that aren't necessarily adding to this.
Yeah, I think they're actually a really cool concept, but you're kind of hiding the concept. Like the idea of this hourglass above the turtle and the sand pouring down around him is really cool, but we only see like the very bottom of the hourglass and nothing to really tell us that that's what it is, except for your reference.
It's true, yeah. See more of that, we definitely. And also the character, the real selling point is the fact that this structure is huge because we have a little human there. But it was kind of like we saw in the last piece, the black on black. We completely lose that character. So I would have that character emerging into the light of that cavern to tie it in together, because that's such an important part of the piece. I'd also add too, well, number one, this makes me think of Dark Souls. So I love you for doing that, because I love Dark Souls. And the idea, this concept is really cool. Like, that's something that, like, that really speaks to me. This is the kind of stuff I really dig. So
I agree.
I have to mention that. Yeah. But I would second everything that you guys are saying. I agree. You pretty much know.
Like, there's not an application of lighting or texture to the idea itself. Like, it's all very one-dimensionally flat. Like, the lighting doesn't feel like it was well thought out or designed yet. But the idea itself, like you said, I'm 100% on board with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too is like there's a level of finish that's missing. Like everything kind of has the same soft, like focus quality, but like nothing is coming into focus and feeling like, you know, like sharp edges, rendered textures. So like just spending time, like that head of the turtle, I actually, when I first looked at it, thought the sand was coming out of the turtle's mouth because the head isn't popping forward in front of the sand. And things like that just going in and really like putting some time and love into the edges and the detail and the finish of it helps to resolve some of those confusion.
Yeah.
But thank you, Courtney. Great submission.
Yeah.
I've got an invader.
And,
speaking of Dark Souls, Adam, I have an invader. Please come get her.
Hello.
I'll let you guys critique this. I'm gonna go return this lost parcel. You
she
guys
really
just
needs
talk.
to sound cuter, in my opinion. She really doesn't sound cute enough, in my opinion. She really needs to sound cuter. Jesus. God, what a pumpkin. All right, so Jessica, go for it. What do you think? I personally, I have a big problem with that pink streak.
Yeah, I think that's Tyler.
Yeah, no, he did it.
Okay.
It's like, that's out of place. A big pink Cheez-It right there. So what do you think?
I think it could be interesting. There's certain things I like about the concept. It feels really unfinished to me. It feels more like a thumbnail than it does a finished painting. So just like, you know, the all of the edges of everything is just kind of scratched in as opposed to like designed edges or surfaces.
Yeah.
But I think that the design of the figure is kind of interesting. This like long bladed weapon, like stretching across the image, has a really nice symmetrical quality to it.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard to say like at this level of finish where it could go.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe there was a 3D template used in this piece. I'm not sure. But I can see like the geometry. I can see that you use kind of like the smudge tool to get some of the soft versus hard edges, but there's no particular direction with that. What I do like is the limited palette, the analogous color palette. I think it looks really, really nice. I think the main thing, apart from what you said, Jessica, the main thing that kind of irks me is I'm not a big fan of very centered compositions, right? I prefer a little bit of an off center. I like the imbalance of his weapon, like in juxtaposition to all these very vertical and horizontal shapes, but it's really smack dab in the middle. And that I like a little bit of imbalance in a piece.
Yeah, I think centered compositions are hard to pull off. You have to have a good sense of how to move the eye through the image and not have it become static. And one thing that's throwing me off about the composition in particular is we have this like glowing circular thing, and then we have this figure underneath it. And they feel very like visually separate from each other, and they're both competing for being the like hierarchy, like the centerpiece of the painting. Yeah. And so they're fighting with each other rather than working with each other.
Yeah. And Tyler, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm sure everything that I normally would say you guys did. So I'll just say what I'd fix immediately. Like probably the fact that the guy's sitting on the ground. I'd want to know why these stairs aren't symmetrical. It feels like this is a situation where they're different scale. There's like different depths on it. It's making me like, it's blowing my mind. I can't figure it out. And then the other thing that's really upsetting me, I guess, is like how unfinished like a third of this image really does look. Like what is going on back there?
Yeah, like, you know what I would say? I think overlying, I think it's something that we all kind of that resonates with everybody. Put time into things. It shows that you were kind of, it was kind of, you did it and you're like, you wanted to move on. And one of the most important skills that an artist needs to learn is patience, because the difference between you and your greatest work is the patience to do it, right? So slow yourself down, put the time in to polish something up, and really, and you'll be respected for that effort. So it definitely pays off.
Yeah, because we all know when we kind of rush through an area or half-ask it, and it really reflects and hurts all of our work when we do so.
Yeah, yeah. It'll haunt us for the rest of our lives.
Hey, Cyan, this is cool.
Yeah,
So
this
this
is
is
very
like
different
psychedelic, right? And how this
Yeah.
different zones and stuff.
Like, this is again something you can't teach somebody how to have a creative mind like this. And there's a real purity of imagination in this piece that I really, really like. And a lot of artists tend to be very technical, very regimented and very technical, but they lack a lot of that creativity. This kind of stuff is very memorable. Technically, I think it definitely needs some work with the values, the rendering, the colors, the saturations. That definitely needs some thought, but don't do that at the expense of the gift you've got, which is your creative spirit. Because I'm going to remember this piece for that reason. It's
Yeah, the concept of this is really interesting. I love the like stained glass of like the different skies and how it
Yeah.
correlates to time. But I think it's more in the execution.
Yeah.
Just like taking the time, like the clock that's painted, like actually doing some material studies and like actually being able to visually describe what that material is that the clock's
Yeah.
made out of. And another thing that's throwing me off on this one is just color. Like you have every color of the rainbow in here, in almost equal degrees or equal amounts. And so just trying to create a color palette where the colors all interact in a meaningful designed way with each other, rather than just having so many different colors that are all competing with each other.
Yeah. Yeah, it's every color. It's all over limiting your like we saw in the last piece, having a limited color palette, working with less colors is more advantageous.
Like,
It's easier to harmonize when you use less colors in your piece.
like if you took all the green out that you have glowing through the whole thing, that would immediately help the image. If you
Yeah.
made that green like a bright red or a bright blue, almost any other something else that's already in the image, but just in a different context or like a brighter version of it. So it seems like it's glowing, but having it be a completely new color from everything else in the image is difficult.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So a lot of the problems that we are generally seeing a lot, but not on most cases. The first one is that the idea, the concept itself, right, which is not the situation here, but some other people are lacking in their idea and how it's executed. The other problem stems largely in the drawing side of it, right, where it's the setup, it's the arrangement, it's the structure. And then the third major problem that we're seeing is the application to that drawing and the concept, which is, I think, largely where this falls, is the application of painting, color and light, materials, and such. So again, you guys can improve faster if you tend to start isolating and identifying where your problems are falling into and figuring out what you need to do to fix those, because each problem has its own sets of regiments and routines you can do to start attacking that.
Yeah, I will say that the skies, the varying different types of skies is probably the best painted part of the entire image.
Yeah,
those are really well done.
That's where I keep looking too.
Yeah.
Those clouds would keep grabbing me all the time. All right, what do we have? Dale.
Ooh.
Dale. All right. So again, we always have a theme. Wait, Tyler, we always have a theme, and this is the theme: black on black. You see how that main character is too dark against a dark background. It's the third time. Every time we do one of these behind the scenes, there's always a common theme, and that's our theme. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I just had to say. Yeah. Zelda, you said Zelda? Zelda. Yeah. I'm feeling it, man. I'm feeling it.
I really love the color palette. I feel like these pinks and blues, the sense of glowing light against these deep twilight blues is really pretty.
It's gorgeous.
But I feel like the shape of it, like the design of the shapes isn't working, but the color, the sense of light is really lovely.
You know what? This is an absolutely perfect situation to integrate atmospheric light into the shot, i.e. blue light. The sky is a light source shining down on things. And to have that light filling in a lot of those areas that are all in the shadow is going to bring out those three-dimensional forms while adding that extra layer of depth to your shadows and to your colors. Yeah, I think would have a completely transformative impact on this piece.
Yeah.
Just adding some atmospheric light hitting from the top.
Like right in here, like separating this character out, right? Just getting, I don't know the right way I want to kind of portray this, but I'll do like one idea or one guess, like where you stick something like that, you throw it on a pin light. Yeah, see, it didn't work in this case. Let me try again. Yep, see, that's too much. Subtlety, right? If I adjust this hue, you guys can talk. I'm just gonna fiddle with this.
Yeah, I think one thing that's throwing me off is kind of just this like repetition of shapes piercing up into the sky. Like we've got the dragon head, which is really cool. And then we've got this like big stone structure that's kind of mirroring the shape of him, and then another one and another one. And they're not coming together as like a whole shape anymore. They're like more like lines across the page. And they're kind of competing with each other, and that's throwing me off a little bit. And I almost wonder, like, if you moved the shapes of the stone and the dragon head so that the face maybe was coming between the two stones, and one of those stones was pushed off to the farther side of the canvas, and they framed it rather than become a series of high contrast marks going across the image.
I realize why I'm so jealous of you, Jessica, because you say these things and I'm like, why the hell didn't I think of that?
Yeah.
Oh no.
It's your bloody ideas that make you so damn good. I'm sitting there, I'm visualizing what you're saying, and I'm now regretting the fact that I didn't paint this. I wish I had this painting so I could do that. This is, yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah.
Great
I
suggestion.
feel like if the stone.
This is really pretty. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like if that middle stone and the dragon were just kind of like the peaks of them were reversed, it would be really, really compelling.
Yeah.
No,
it
I
really
agree.
would. Yeah.
All right, Cypher.
Ooh, what do we got here? Now I love this piece, but I don't see the connection to time. Maybe that there's that kind of design. Yeah, I see the knights, and I can see there's kind of like this glyph thing. That's not clear enough as a statement. Yeah, and I think one of the reasons for this is that it's a compositional thing. And what would have made this work is you have a horse coming up on one side, and you have the character. I would have brought that character's hand into the middle of the shot and created a kind of frame with a circle of horses or something like that kind of created a focal point and have that character holding up their hand in the middle. Because what you've done is you've created the values are competing with each other, because you got this bright thing in the background that's grabbing our attention, and that's actually pulling our attention away from from the actual story, which is the thing coming out of the knight's hand.
Yeah.
And I would move that knight's hand in the middle, because you're making a much clearer statement that's where the story's happening, right? So I would actually take that as beautifully drawn as that portal thing in the background is, get rid of it, because it's actually pulling us away from the focal point. And immediately, as soon as you do that, you notice the blue thing.
And it's so abstract that we're not really connecting it in any like meaningful way to the story here.
These are very distracting, these lines. Like, I'm not sure what that's about. And the fact that this horse is just looking dead straight on at us, like he's staring at us, also irks me. Like, add that natural tilt. Like, it's in this horse, it's in this horse. Like, there's overlaps of all of that. But he's, like, so set... Like he's gonna come spear me in my sleep.
He's like,
need an angle.
Yeah. Don't worry about them.
Well, it becomes so like aggressively, like it's in the foreground. It has high contrast, so it's like almost all you can look at is this horse's face.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then again, your eyes going back to that glowing center in the background, and it's like your eyes getting dragged like all these different places, but not in a designed way.
I'd spend more time on the drawing stage in this particular case. Do loads of comps and passes to figure out what's best to express this, and run it through the community. That people will be honest, like, and call out many of the things that we just did. I have confidence in that, and I think that would help your structure in that. The challenge on top of that, let's just say you nailed a composition, your materials, they're going to be a challenge for any level artist to absolutely pull off in this. You've got drapery, you've got different types of metals and armors, you got loads of artificial light, I think natural light as well, and how it's going to affect all these materials. That's a load of work.
It's too complicated. Yep.
A load of responsibility. Just so you know, it's like you're setting this a very challenging image, so don't feel bad about some of the misses.
And I would say one of the biggest things that cause people to fail at a painting is that you bit off more than you could chew. And that's not an amateur comment. That is a professional comment. I screw up whenever I find myself screwing up on a painting. It's because it was too involved. There was too much going on in the piece. And when I strip away all that garbage and I just add to the piece what needs to be there to sell the story, all of a sudden figuring it out is a lot easier. But there's just too much for you to haggle in that piece, and it made a mess of it, right? Yeah.
I like this composition. This is unique.
Black on black. There it is. There it is.
It's nice contrast right here.
Look at the design of that cloak and the holy smokes.
Yeah, it's got good shapes and good flow. I still would stick this thing in like right here. Like that, it's like unnecessarily off to the side.
It feels like the picture's kind of divided in half. You have the one side with the robot thing and the one side with the guy, but they don't feel integrated.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe just like you said, moving it over, but having the figure kind of go in front of some of those floating shapes that overlap again will make it feel more connected. Or the orbs that he's holding overlapping the top of the thing.
Yeah.
But this is good, and you can see the structure, guys, right here on the thumbnails. Like, they spent like a while. Carmelo spent a while planning and thinking like the best distribution of lines, shapes, and values, and I think all that planning paid off.
Yeah. You know what? Here, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, Jess, but one of the things, that computer, I wouldn't put the computer in the background. That's separating the piece. I would take that computer out so we make a direct connection between the robot and the character. That thing, I would put that computer off in the back.
Yeah, I'd have it overlap.
The statuette is
much smaller.
Yep.
And that'll create a direct connection between the two. And also that lighter brown, that's silhouetting his arm, I would extend that around the whole head and the back so that beautiful black silhouette pops. Because I just keep staring at that. I just can't get enough of that.
Yeah, I still think there's too much flat black in this. Like the color density is really low throughout. Like you could just see like gray in this and black in this. When this type of scene, if you were to see this type of scene in a movie, there'd be loads of cinematic color and light, elements happening. Like this is too white, that's too black. Not in terms of value structure, but in terms of how that color is being perceived.
I feel like it was intentional to leave like large portions of the image black and white, but I feel like it's not working because the things that you've chosen to give color to aren't adding much to it. I mean, that brown is beautiful, but all the important pieces of the image are black and white, and it's just the wall and the ground that has color, but then the stairs don't. So again, even in that, it's inconsistent. And I almost feel like the black and white version is better realized in some ways than the color version because of that.
Yeah. But I'm like,
but it's really
judgment on it onto the rest of the community, which kind of dilutes that a little bit, makes it less personal, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah.
All right. Smart. Next up, Jumper.
Are we recording?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I'll jump in. Well, I like when you actually put the pieces of the puzzle together. This guy in the top suit with the top hat and the clock, and then you see the hourglass in the back with the Grim Reaper. I can put the pieces of the puzzle of the story. But something about this, I think it's probably in the way that the main character has been rendered with high contrast next to everything else that's a little bit lower contrast. It feels like it's a bit of a cut and paste with that character, right? I would want to see him
staged,
blend in a little bit.
It feels staged, like it artificially.
Yeah. Yeah. And the composition feels cut in half. Like you have literally that bridge that's cutting the composition in half. And the top half has that cool glowy hourglass thing and the figures up there. And then the bottom half has this guy standing in front of it. Yeah. And they don't feel connected in a meaningful way.
I want to know what's his story. What is he doing here? How does he relate to any of this? And I don't get any of the narrative. So for me, it doesn't work on a conceptual side.
And I'm also having trouble with the overuse of gray, of black and white, with just like a few colors popped in. It's not it's not feeling well designed, the integration of black and white and color. And like his clothing and the environment all seem black and white, but then his skin is in color. And then the environment seems black and white, but then all of the light sources are prismatic and colored.
Guys,
and so it's just throwing me off.
There's like a little figure right here I just noticed.
Like,
what's the story with that? That's what I would want to know. Like, I think a lot of this one, the problems are at the structure. Like, if you take all the white elements, this thing, it all just kind of beads straight down the middle of a very elongated composition. So it's like, yeah, it's just structure for me in this. Like, the person can paint pretty well, but it's like, why are all these decisions being made is what I would focus on.
Yeah, explore different compositions. Try different things out, and I would even if you're not sure yourself, ask an outside. I always ask outsiders' opinions on my work because I kind of get tunnel vision. So get a general consensus on your work, and people say, oh, they'll point it out for you, and you can fix it accordingly. Get other people's help for that. It really makes a big difference.
Oh, Eric.
Soft edge. I love this, but this is a soft edge beast, right?
Yeah.
You've got all this brushy stuff everywhere, which is really making it hard to read. That's my feedback for this one. I just say focus on.
My first thought when I look at this is noisy. Like my eye is jumping everywhere. Like it's like I've got this like super complex octopus. I've got like this reflection. I've got all of these like screens. I've got these beams coming up. I've got this floating thing over here with orbs coming off of it. I got this halo of solar flare light thing in the background, and my eye is just like, what do I look at? What's important?
What's being emphasized here, right? That's what it comes down to. You have like subject A, you have subject B on two ends of the spectrum here, and then their relationship's kind of established, but there's a lack of flow, and there's a lack of that organization of light and value and how they're distributed.
And they're also both pushed to far ends of the spectrum or far ends of the composition, and then you have a strong vertical line literally cutting the image in half.
Yeah.
It's like telling us these are two different images. And so like they're not integrating in any way.
Yeah. The other thing too is if you look at it objectively, and Tyler had it in black and white a second ago. If you look at it in black and white and you zoom away to a tiny little thumbnail, and then hold down the space bar and start moving it around, just moving it around the screen, and pay attention to where your eye tracks. You'll notice that your eye will always lock on to the point of highest contrast. That's how the human eye needs contrast to focus, like a camera. So that contrast is up in the top right corner where that kind of circular wisp shape is, and that's where your eye's going to keep getting pulled as a result of it. Right. So make sure that that contrast is that contrast is a tool you're going to use to say, look there. And right now, those two areas of focus are both very muted and gray, making them very hard to lock onto with our eyes. And that you want to do the opposite, right?
Felipe Olivier. All right. Hey, Felipe.
Jesus.
This is cool.
This is Time Jesus. Right there.
Yeah, Time Jesus. So you got good shape and forms on the clouds. Maybe you followed someone's tutorial on YouTube. Hint, hint. But what's going on is a little more than that. You're like, those are pretty well done, but like you have like a huge lack of control on the technical side of this. Whether it's the edge work in the mountains, whether the mountains feel flat compared to your nice volumetric clouds, to whether it's this pasted in forest texture right there. This becomes like a little bit of a collage of all these different techniques and elements, and nothing's kind of pieced together in a very unified way yet. If you guys have something specific, go in. I'm done.
Well, go ahead, Jessica, please.
Okay. For me, it's the bright green graphic shapes of the orbs floating around him, and I feel like they're meant to look like these like magical geometric spell-like things, but because they're so like hard edged and like look like they were drawn with like shape tools, and they look very like solid and physical because of the like hard dark lines, they just feel like these like cut out geometric shapes glued on top of the image. And I find it very distracting.
Yeah. Here's my advice, and this is something I see very often with students and stuff like that, is this is my advice to you, Philippe. I'm talking to you directly. Don't use any tools or shortcuts or photographic references or anything. Just draw, because what's happening is you're trying to shortcut the painting process by using photographic templates in 3D or whatever you can, and then when it comes to you actually hand drawing something, you don't have that skill yet. And that's where those clocks come in, and that's where the character comes in. You had to draw that, but you couldn't execute it. So what's happening is we're looking at the much more not critically, being honest, okay, a much more novice drawing next to very high-res photographs, and it's very jarring. So just draw. Practice your drawing, period. That's the toll we must all pay. We got to get over that hurdle. So that's my advice to you. Get rid of photographs, get rid of 3D, and just focus on drawing fundamentals. That's it. That's it.
I'd want to know too, Adam, like, is this guy standing on a chimney? Are these... Because, like, structurally they're set up like a chimney on a house, minus, of course, the hole. But, like, what are
I guess maybe
like,
on an altar or...
What do they belong to? That's what I just kept looking at it and getting more and more questions as you guys were going. But, again, that's something you want to make obvious for the viewer. Like, what is the context?
Yeah.
Great feedback, guys. I'm sure.
Yeah, I almost feel like you'd be better off, like, making this a vertical thing and just zooming in on the character and just spending time learning to realize that figure, as opposed to coming up with all these other parts of the composition. Like picking one area, just zooming in on it, and just really spending time and love on that one part.
And referencing. Don't try to do it from your head. Reference. You know, get a picture reference and draw what you see. It'll help you, because when you do it from your head, if you don't have that anatomy knowledge yet, it's gonna bite you in the butt.
I like the style of this piece, guys.
Yeah,
old heavy metal style.
Like it's very kind of comic booky, very a little bit 80s. The problem too that I'm having with this is, like, you could see the light and how it affects some of the shapes and the forms, right? The forms, like on the character, like on the skin, on the hands, on the face. Like the light feels believable, but as soon as you get into the character's clothing, as soon as you look at the drapery and how that all works, it completely falls apart. Like there's no reference in this at all. It all looks like it was made up out of their head.
Yeah.
Like it becomes very disbelievable very quickly, where it's like very strong right in here, and then it's like bam.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a testament to exactly what we mentioned in the last piece, which was, if you don't use reference, what you paint will never ring true, right? And what you're doing is you're drawing what you think folds look like. You're not drawing what folds look like. So look it up. That's all. That's what a professional has to do. We always look up everything. We reference it. We heavily research what we're drawing, and it's really what I see here is just a lack of reference, a lack of research. That's it. If you had those references, you wouldn't be making those mistakes.
Because I love the idea.
Yeah, I feel like the style is very strong. Your mark making is really interesting. Even in like the very empty negative spaces, there's just really beautiful like brushwork that's pleasant to the eye. But it just comes down to form. Like those two light things, I don't know if they're like pendulums on a clock. Like I'm having trouble understanding what those are. Again, like the interior of the form where the sword is in front of, I'm having trouble understanding what I'm looking at there, what those shapes are. And even some of the stuff in the face, it took me a moment to understand like the white lines where the lips were. And
the
like
mouth
that.
is definitely off.
Yeah. So there's some structural form things that could use a lot more attention, but the consistency of the mark making and the style is really nice.
Yeah, very much.
Thank you
there's
for
something
submitting.
you definitely don't want to hold on to there.
My favorite part about these challenges is such the variety that we bring out of everybody.
It's challenging,
Literally,
we
you
gotta
never know what you're gonna get.
Space every time. Yeah.
Donnie, look at this.
Look
piece.
at this.
Oh my!
I love it. This is so cool.
Like conceptually, for me, this is really cool. Like there's vague bits of hourglass. You can see the sand integrated into the design. Like there was so much thought put into this idea. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, this is really creative. Really well done. And I love the use of that blue, like the light and then the blue is like the graphic shapes of it are just so interesting and visually pleasing. Just really, really nicely designed.
And a good example too of, again, like we saw with the portal piece earlier, the focal point, it's a very good use of a focal point. Everything is the lines and the composition, everything's drawing our attention to that where that little character is. But in this case, we can see how that silhouette has been resolved a little bit. We can kind of feel that baby shape a little bit more, but a very good use of focal point. And I love the rendering, those fingers and the lighting that's hitting it. That's really, really pretty too. I feel
really
maybe it needs a bit of variety in the color. There's so much warmth everywhere. I know that Tyler's a good. I would ask Tyler about this. How you would break up these warm tones a little bit to neutralize it.
The game that this person's dealing with in regards to the color and form is all in their halftone range, right? Their halftones are largely getting lost in a lot kind of flat as a result. So if they bring more neutrals into loads of these halftones, these areas in the shadow areas, which I think is very good. Like they've very specifically delineated, this is a shape of shadow, this is a shape of light, shape of shadow, shape of light, which is good, which is what a lot of more people need to do. But within that shadow shape, that's where they need to embellish. Like they need to overblow a lot of the shapes of the light, to increase the exposure, and then you have more range you can utilize in the shadows, and using those midtones and the neutrals to do that would be the best way, in my opinion, to really portray that.
Yeah. Yep.
One thing I wanted to point out, as far as like successes go, that we've seen other people struggling so far in this challenge, is the use of edges. Like, just look how nicely he's had like the sharp edges where the face splits apart, and then the soft edges where the mouth goes over the hand, and then like it's the same blue, it's the same colors, but he's using edges to tell us so much more information about it in a really effective way.
Yep, exactly.
Beautiful job, Dolly.
2 thumbs up, man. Really nice. All right, we have one more on this.
Yep, Fanders. So this is a good example of a piece that's pretty internally consistent, that has pretty good edge control, overall.
Yeah.
For me, what's weird is like how this. Okay, I didn't notice the band on the character. It's like they're gonna fall over, but that makes sense.
Why is that, Tyler? Why is that? Black on black. If it wasn't for the blue silhouette, we wouldn't see the character. We'd completely lose all that. So you want to make sure to put a little. I would put a little bit kind of like atmosphere, like maybe some like mist or a little bit of contrast behind the character, so that darker silhouette pops.
Yeah.
And that we would see the band and the dark side of the.
Yeah, a lot of these black
you already
colors.
Have the blue light.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that blue light could be pushed with the atmosphere. Like, it's still like you can still almost see, like, it feels like there's way too much 3D in there. I mean, I don't know, they could have not used 3D, but it has that stiff sort of 3D kind of look to it. It's like a clay model, because there's not a lot of color or design. Like, these aren't necessarily steps yet. They're just cylinders stacked on a cylinder in a cylinder room with an oval, what is it called, like a soft arched door. But the door's not designed, the wall's not the design. The only bit of design on it are these patterns that we do see, which, that's like a start, but nothing more.
Right. None of the materials actually start to feel real in the room. Like the walls don't feel like a wall. The floor doesn't feel like a floor. It just feels like a fill-in shape that's waiting to be painted on.
Yeah, it's a weird setup for me, having this element so far down in the corner, kind of like right here. It seemed like this would make a lot more sense to have that set a little bit further off in the background, changing the angle entirely. That way the character's kind of like aiming from a bit further and not such this forced angle there, where this important element is so far down there, and like a lot of the space ends up not getting utilized to this best.
Also, speaking of aiming, her arm looks like she's aiming towards the bottom of the canvas rather than at the
right
figure
here.
We're not getting that
because the top of her body like flattens out and becomes like parallel with us, whereas lower body and also the placement of the thing she's standing on versus the throne says that she should be pointing into the room.
Yep. Good eye. I didn't notice that until you said it, but now that's all I could see.
I'm sorry.
Just guys, I'm gonna jump in because I'm gonna go get my kids. But I love you both. You guys are awesome.
Thank you for joining us this far, Adam.
You too.
Yes, and thank you everybody, from my heart to yours, for your beautiful work. Just freaking gorgeous stuff. So I'll let Jessica and Tyler take over from here.
See you next month, Adam.
Bye.
Take care, guys.
New Year.
You too. Happy New Year. Bye.
All right.
Connect there.
All right, Kiko. Kiko's back. Kiko's getting better with the lighting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, see, like that's some nice planning going on in there.
Yeah, it's a cool setup.
I still
I
don't know
like.
if this back. Sorry, if this back one. I get okay. I see it now. It's supposed to be a bit slanted. It's looking too spherical for me. I guess it should be more
Yeah,
flat.
until you pointed out that that's what that was supposed to be, I actually didn't realize that that was slanted. I thought it was just a weird circle shape. So I wasn't getting that sense of depth of it leaning back in space. And I almost wonder if straight on, like directly centered, is the best way to portray something like that, because we get so much more interesting visual shapes from the side version of that structure.
Is there a side version in the? Oh, you could see where they were doing the their take on this center based pose. So I think they can make it work. But like you said, or was it Adam? Doing a center composition can be easier, but it also balancing that out and making it formally interesting is where the work comes in.
There is something I really like about the graphic quality of the stripes on the floor leading
Yeah.
to the figure. Like that was really well done, and I get a
Yeah.
much better sense of space and depth than I do from the top of that
Yeah,
slanted pillar.
I see how they reference the stairs and this whole object together, but there's something awkwardly kind of confining about how that's all portrayed there. Like the perspective does seem off on them, and yeah, like there's something about this version of it that I actually kind of like a bit more because like it doesn't feel quite as distraction. But again, the floor perspective is not it's not matching the perspective of this object here.
Right. And another thing that's throwing me off on this one is some of the glowing effects are confusing
A little
the
bit much.
structural shapes.
A little
Yeah,
bit
like
much.
the one coming up on the right side, coming up from the hand, going into the hourglass, is like kind of like confusing the edge of that cylinder. And then the ones on the top left are confusing the top edge and like almost like blurring out the edge of that shape there,
Yep.
where visually my eye feels like it just goes off the page there instead of stops. And so some of those light atmospheric magic effects are actually distracting from the rest of the image rather than helping.
Yeah, they come off heavy-handed, and a lot of that too. Like we started out, like we should be able to see a lot of that form and how that light is affecting a loads of these forms and stuff down there based off what's going on in there. So there's like a lot of like little subtle things like that that definitely need to get addressed. But besides that, it still looks like almost like a black and white image was colored too much because there's not a lot of subtlety to it. Like a lot of these shadows are very flat blue. So like the other one, the halftone range in the shadows could be pushed and maximized quite a bit.
Yeah, it still feels tinted rather
Yep.
than like a color painting.
But yeah, really cool idea, and I do like a lot about it.
Yeah, there's a really nice graphic quality to it, to the design of it that I like.
Jefferson. All right, so this is okay. We got a monk dude. We got the altar. So yeah, like you can tell when Sun's using a 3D base, the perspective's all in line, but then some of the shadows and it's still like it looks like a little bit too cut and pasty. It's like you just dropped this giant like paper or canvas texture over everything, and nothing's really integrated seamlessly quite yet for you. And I think just experience, doing this a lot and looking at art that uses 3D, to be hand painted will also keep benefiting you.
And I think one of the things about this image is that it's just almost too static. Like it's too still. There's nothing that really comes alive or becomes dynamic or visually interesting. Everything in a way kind of just stays subdued and motionless. And I think like it needs something, like if you look at the two images on the references over there, the lighting is very dynamic and interesting, and the graphic shape that the light is making in the darkness is what makes like that monk interesting, whereas the floating figure that you have in front of the light is completely visible, fully rendered, and then the blue light behind him is almost not a light. It's so mid-range that it doesn't become dynamic and interesting. And so I think like just trying to choose what your statement is. What about this image is interesting? And then really using your values and things like that to push that and make it dramatic and compelling in some way so it feels like there's a story.
Yeah, the lighting's really flat up in a lot of areas, and it doesn't seem like it's 100% sure how it wants to convey that information. Like that
if
would
this
be
is
cool.
like about like glowing thing behind him, then show that like the effect of that glowing thing against the darkness.
Yeah, like
um
where is this orange light coming from? Like in this whole area right here, for example. It seems like that should be at a much more kind of level in tone of like something like this, particularly if that's the light source, right? And then you're gonna see if that's the light source as well. You're gonna see the cast shadow from all of this, like quite a bit more. So yeah, the lighting is, like you said, adding to a lot of flatness that is kind of happening here, particularly these pure black shadows on the
yeah.
side. That's like a big thing you want to avoid.
Yeah, it feels like the image just kind of disappears into darkness off the side, but not in a way that like is interesting to the focal point of the image, but just kind of the picture just kind of fades off on the sides. Um,
Yep.
so yeah, like I feel like in a way, like when you're painting, you have to be a storyteller. What are we supposed to feel when we look at this? What is the impact of this image emotionally? And how do you use light and color to convey that?
Yeah, that's what a lot of it comes down to is when you see a lot of art and techniques like this is you have to get into the headspace of your picture and ask yourself, right, those deep questions. Like, oh, all right, this is cool.
It's interesting.
This is very interesting. I'm a bit, I don't know, it's like weird because you have like the character which is graphic, then you have very dense areas of photo texture detail, and then you can see photos in the background. I don't know. It looks very chaotic and a little bit haphazard. Like the drawing is fine, but like how it's constructed, like I'm finding like a lot of distracting aspects of it.
Yeah, like I feel like in some ways you're going for these graphic silhouettes that are almost flattened and cut out, which could be really cool. And you have some very interesting shapes that could work well with. But then you're also going to like these very like cloudy, noisy, like sandy cloud shapes that are completely like contradicting that statement that you're making with the cutout shapes, and they're not integrating in a meaningful way. So it's like my eyes kind of going back and forth. Is this supposed to be three-dimensional and rendered, or is this supposed to be cut out and graphic? And then it kind of is going back and forth in random places without really making a clear statement of what is supposed to be dominant.
Yeah, the colors and light feel like they weren't planned out at all, which is like it's too bad because I think the figure, as you can see, that's what they were iterating on. The figure is actually really well constructed, but it's like how it
Yeah.
was all painted is for me what
Yeah,
is really bringing it down.
the silhouette of the figure is really interesting, and I think in some ways those thumbnails down there of the figure, because there's more consistency, because there's not all these things competing with them, um, are more visually pleasant to look at.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I think you have a really cool idea here with the figure, but I don't think that you've integrated it into an illustration or a painting in a way that makes sense yet.
Yeah, like Adam said a while ago, try to avoid any kind of photo things and just see what you can get out of planning and painting out every value, every shape, and every line in
Yeah.
your scene.
And what if you had designed the environment in the same way that you designed the figure and
Yeah,
paid as much
and
attention
it can
to
that
the shapes?
that's what it needs to be, right, Jesse? Equal emphasis or attention paid to every part of your image. It can't be like, oh, I
Hmm.
like characters or I like the tree behind them, and you just focus on that, and then everything else kind of falls like internally consistent. The quality is not equally distributed throughout the whole piece, and that's where a lot of problems tend to come from.
Yep, yep.
Timekeeper, hey Juan, how you doing? So this is like a very dramatic, sort of like very interesting image. I kind of like.
Yeah.
I like
There,
this story.
there's certain things I really like. I like the rich blue sky with those like bronzy, colors, I think is really interesting. I think for me, the biggest part that I'm struggling with is just the overuse of black and white.
Yeah.
Like so much of the image is so dark and like goes straight to black that I'm just like, what am I looking at? I see kind of this round glowy shape. I see maybe the top of his head. I see another glowy shape off to the side and then these glowing columns. But like the black and white, the checkerboarding,
Yep.
you know,
Light, dark,
noise
light,
of
dark,
the light
light, dark,
darkness.
light, dark.
I'm having a really hard time understanding the forms.
Yeah, you want to bring a lot more softness into a lot of this so you can really help sell and focus on the higher shapes. Because, I mean, the problem is, right, we want to look at how this would look on, like, you know, very small thumbnail to really get that viewer to check it out, you know, to captivate a viewer. It's hard to captivate a viewer like that if this is what they're going to see when they first see your work and you can't make out anything in it. And it's
Yep.
just going to have that effect that people are, there's too much competition is what it is. There's too many other images scrolling and around where this is ever going to be displayed. People are going to pass it by. So you got to entice a viewer to stop. And the first step to doing that is having a very unique and clearly defined value structure that looks pleasant at a very, very tiny readability.
Mm-hmm. So I would probably bring in some light source that gets rid of all of that blackness that's in the foreground and actually create a visible
it needs an
3D
atmosphere.
form there.
Yeah, it needs to soften it, like kind of like what's going on in this one. You need to bring in just like some literal atmosphere to all of that. I mean, in space there is an atmosphere, but that's where you have to get creative. Look at some of the retro sci-fi art from like the 70s and 80s. That all these painters captivated space, and they did it. You know, and it looks nothing like actual space because actual space is boring to look at, right? It's just black with some stars. So, Cuba, what's up, Cuba? This is very interesting. Like I like the lighting, and I like a lot of these elements, but this is for me to word it simply. It doesn't come together yet.
Yeah, as an illustration, like there's too many like, just vague shapes that don't really mean anything to my eye. But there's something really nicely painted about that one oval shape on the left side, like the way the light is passing through it, this feeling of like a softness to the surface that the light is interacting with. There's something about that that's really visually pleasing, but the image as a whole, the composition isn't tying together. Yeah, there's
supposed to be a person there. There's supposed to be a person. Who knew?
I didn't even see that.
See, that's a problem with the design right there. You gotta get people to see that without working for it. Look at that. That's like
I didn't even realize.
Right, this is a huge part. Like your whole composition could be
that changes everything.
Could be like something like this. Like, I mean, this isn't great composition, but like this is your focus. You got to figure out how to sell this as the idea, right? This is your core idea, but that is not what is getting sold here, right? You're selling this cave that's got some candles in it, some fancy looking candles. So you're telling a different story than I think you actually want to, right? Like 50%. Go.
I'm also like just the design of those figures, those candle figures, versus this thing that the person is floating in front of. Like they feel like they're made of the same material, but one is shaped like a person and one isn't, and so I'm confused why that is. And then they're all lined up in a row, going across the image in a way that's just not very visually interesting. Like they're not grouped around this strange candle shape; they're just like lined up behind it. And I think that just thinking about the way that those shapes interact with the main overall shape would be much more. You could create a much more interesting layout.
Yeah, a lot of this canvas space is about 60% of it is just not adding to your story. It's not adding to the theme or statement. It's wasted space. And again, this could get solved by loads of composition and quicker sketches that you don't commit to. That way you won't get attached too soon.
Yep.
So for me, that's what I call a classic case of a missed opportunity when there's like at its core a really intriguing idea. All right, what is this? Included this, but doesn't follow the guidelines. So that's what Tim said. All right, I'm sorry whoever did this. It looks like they're just sketches. But yeah, it's like 3 little ideas that I don't know. They all have potential. Like, you have really good drawing skills, whoever this is. Um, like any of these, when worked fully, can really work. But I think today we're just gonna leave it at that because we are looking for like one finished, solid-looking image. So maybe next, and we gave a lot of extra time on this one. People had like almost 6 weeks. So we're just gonna leave it there and get the next batch. We're on the last batch here, folks. We're just gonna open the final 8. And yeah, we'll check these out. So let's go with Nick Conjura. I too like Skinsky. Okay. This is
interesting.
Yeah, interesting setup. There's a lot of technical things that I'm seeing if you're looking to improve consistency though. Like there's like a lot of it doesn't feel like a lot of color control in the background, and that can be layered onto your shapes, edges, and forms. Like everything about that tree above here feels very kind of flat. Like we should see underneath it. It should feel very volumetric in regards to the form and where the light just kind of comes in and slaps it and hits very flat across all of these areas.
And then kind of like glows around all the edges of it, but not really interact with it in a 3-dimensional way.
And and then it feels like you didn't know what to do in the background, so you just painted it this very kind of over-key, lightly, intensely saturated, misty color stuff. So I think some of it...
It feels like a lot of it is like monochromatic, but it's different monochromatic in different areas. Like you got the sepia-colored sky, you've got these kind of green and orange different areas to the tree where they feel monochromatic in that area, but it's not consistent throughout the whole tree. And then you've got like this black shape with purple highlights, which is very monochromatic. And I think that the area that's the best executed is in the middle where that clock is. And you've got like these pretty teal colors mixed with the golds, mixed with the contrast of the black. And that feels really nicely designed. And then the rest of the image feels kind of muddy and oversimplified in comparison.
Like, I think this is like a huge inspiration, right, for this person. And what this image is doing right that isn't is selling the shape and form with the color and the light. This is still largely monochromatic. I get it, it's their style, but there's enough neutrals in there, and they're selling enough of the forms that it does feel very volumetric as a result.
But also, they're also paying very close attention to temperature in the light and shadow. So while it is monochromatic or analogous, the lights are like this yellow or green, and then they go into orange, and then they go into almost a desaturated greenish color into the shadows. But there's a very clear like temperature shift from light to dark, which you're not staying true to in your image, where you have certain areas where it's all green, regardless of how light or dark it is. Certain areas that are all orange, regardless of how light or dark it is. And so look at how controlled they are. Like if you color pick all the light areas, it'll be in the same temperature range. If you color pick all the dark areas, it'll be in the same temperature range, which isn't true of their piece.
See, the problem too with that is if this tree is your reference, the lighting on this tree is terrible because it's a very flat, sort of soft lit light that does make everything feel flat. But you have like this overhead kind of direct light kind of coming in, from the sky, which is kind of contradicting what goes on in a lot of these products, because these are products. It's kind of showing in there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, very cool idea.
I think even some of the other images he has, again, he's those monochromatic kind of orangish colors, but again, those have a lot of temperature control between the light to shadow.
Nicholas.
That's making them work.
Look at this. This looks like it was done in like an Unreal Engine or something. Crazy. So I think for me, it's the contrast in this piece. Like again, when you make it small, right? If we duplicate that, take out the color, it's very binary. In terms of like how it's reading. Like you can see this and this, but there's no range in between them at all. Like it's either going to go light or dark, and it's vastly underutilizing the grays.
And that there's also a lack of visual flow in the shape of light and dark, where you just have this floating bright thing in a field of lights. The entire half of the image is dark, and then there's this floating bright thing, and then you have kind of this floating shape of the structure in the middle of the canvas that's bright, where the darkness is parting, but they're not in any way like visually connected. And I'd almost want to see that light shape connect to the figure and the glowing thing, like have like the light bounce down into like guide the eye where the figure is, so that they become visually connected, like thinking of the light and dark as abstract shapes that are guiding the eye through the image.
Like, see, this is like a beautiful structure, but how these really contrasty shadows are just dumped on top of it, it doesn't feel planned out in a way. Like, it feels very artificial, as like they feel really, really big. First of all, like if that's a leaf cast onto this, it makes this feel very small, like a toy. So it's kind of how the light is presented and handled in a situation like this. That it sucks, because this is like really beautiful and a very cool design, but it's hard to see it because you have basically equal exposure on your highlights and your shadows, when in these shadows should be a bit softer. They should have a lot more information in regards to that form.
And then as far as storytelling goes, I'm a little confused, like, because when you zoom out, most of the reference material you've sent us is like character design on this figure, but we don't see the figure at all other than his back, like the silhouette of his back and the thing he's carrying. So it makes me wonder why you spent so much time developing like his face and his, costume and the way that he looks, when we don't end up seeing any of that. Yeah. And so I wonder, is there a way to design the image in which we can see more of this figure that you've invested this time into developing?
Yeah, I like the design. I like a lot of the parts of the composition, but yeah, it's still like, I guess I'd say rough around the edges in terms of design decisions and how they're executed. All right. Shizukanbi. Probably got your name wrong. Sorry. Black.
Yeah,
Why is it so black?
Salad.
This could be so beautifully subtle and intricate. You need to discover the world of neutrals and grays. Again, it's the same problem that we just saw, Jess. It's like we have a very bright, intense color, and then shadow. There's zero midtones.
Straight to black.
No midtones.
And also, it's this overuse of black rather than shifting temperature. Rather than where the light is, you have these very warm oranges and reds. And then where there isn't light, things move to a cool range. So they would go into like blues or greens, depending on what direction you wanted to go with it. But you could convey so much information that light isn't hitting areas by just changing the temperature rather than just going straight to black. So those areas could be way higher in value, but just be cool, and our eye will still read them as dark.
Look up some of James Zapata's work. He does a lot of these kind of darker, sort of, in a way, grittier images, but he can milk that lighting raw, and so you could portray a beautifully dark image. And I feel like that becomes a very missed opportunity here, because I love this composition, I love this idea, and I like the design, but the colors and how those colors are handled completely takes me out of it.
Mm-hmm. And another thing is just some of the three-dimensionality of the forms isn't reading, like the stalagmites or whatever that are sticking out of the ground. The way that they're kind of rim lighted flattens them out. Like, it doesn't look like light is wrapping around them. It looks like this flat shape that's bright on one side and dark on the other. And then, like, again, like things like the chains feel very flat and black. They feel like just a chain brush tool rather than a three-dimensional shape that the light is wrapping around. Yep. So just realizing those forms better.
Ray Chan. All right, so okay, we got an hourglass character here.
Interesting.
I like that as an idea, but I don't understand anything else about this. I'm gonna be straight with you. Like, is she walking? Is she fading? I just, too many unknowns. It looks very unfinished.
Yeah, it feels like aside from like her torso and like maybe here, her head, everything else just goes to like fuzzy cloud. Like it doesn't feel like everything else in the image was painted. Like everything else just kind of like, maybe this shape would kind of go here. Maybe that shape would be what was there. With no reason or explanation as to why nothing else in the image would be painted.
Yeah, it's just 85% of the image looks unfinished, and it's too hard to make, proper judgments about any of that. But I can say I like the idea of that character, but even the character doesn't look fully designed. Sorry, I'm sure you guys hear my dog. You're going to hear a toddler. You hear my boiler. It's just the universe that I live in, folks. And there's no way to get around it at this stage in my life. Sorry. All right, so I know this.
We do what we can.
We do what we can. I like how quiet your place is. So this one, I know Rob was going for like a 80s style, like cartoon sort of poster show thing. I don't know if I get that vibe from the colors, but it's still like a little bit bright with not like a lot of contextual lighting. But I think
it's one of those cases again of like they've used every single color, so it doesn't feel like it's a choice. It feels like I grabbed every color. And a
very high saturation. So it's like, yeah, it needs a bit control and it needs restraint, even if you're going for what, you're trying to achieve here. But I like this design. Like this design, I actually like the composition as a center comp. I'd have one of these spheres though, I'll just say, have one of them go out of the comp. It looks like they're all just kind of frozen in there, where this would look a lot better. See if they were like overlaps going out, or something like that, or bring this one out, because it's just all three of them are resting against the top.
I think for me, one of the things that's throwing me off is like inconsistency. Like there's certain areas that feel like very flat and drawn. Then there's other areas that look like they're trying to be three-dimensional form, like the mountains at the ridge of that thing with the water coming off. And then other things that again go back to just like a line drawing. Like the mountains look like they try to be more three-dimensional than the figure that's drawn. And I kind of want to see like a consistency throughout the whole piece. And then you've got like these graphic shapes in the background that don't really have line. They're like just big graphic shapes. And so it's like you kind of need to pick one and have the image itself be more consistent throughout. It's like either it's a line drawing like the figures, or it's a three-dimensional painting like the mountains, or it's these big graphic shapes like the spheres in the background. But all together, they're just fighting with each other.
Yeah, I would continue. I don't know. You got to work on the style thing, but what you develop in regards to what you're referencing, how you're referencing it, to practice more your fundamentals first might be your better option. And then let the style kind of flow in naturally over time. Like it feels too forced, I guess. And you don't want to force style too much, particularly earlier on. All right, let's go. This is cool. I like this. I like this one even more. Look at that one down there. That just jumps.
Yeah.
I
think maybe the lighting and the colors are pushed a little harder than they are in the final.
Yeah.
It's a little more muted in the final. But I really love the color palette. Like, I think it's a really beautiful, like, nuanced combination of purple and green that's really visually pleasant.
There's a lot of good neutrals and a lot of good grays here. Like, a lot of this painting's gray, but they executed it actually very well. And that's what we were talking about was missing from a lot of people's.
And I think that the hierarchy of shapes is really lovely. I think that the shapes are designed really well and lead the eye through the image. Like, I don't feel like things are chopped off from each other.
Yeah, this is a lovely piece.
Yeah, it's really, really pretty.
It's like
I think one of the things that's kind of throwing me off a little bit is the head of this creature, this worm thing that's like leaning down over the glowing thing. Kind of flattens out for me. So if whatever this headdress thing is, it kind of makes it's not reading in space properly, and it's kind of flattening the head out in some way that's not quite making sense to me.
Yeah, it's the form of it kind of going up and around as well. Like the lighting could affect it. Like this could get a little bit more form on it, portraying like that three-dimensionalness of it in a lot of these spaces. But yeah,
I think the worm is supposed to be kind of flat, like a ribbon.
Okay.
But then like how it's like folding down, it's not maintained. Like the rest of the body, like that flatness reads really well, but there's something about where the head is coming down where that flatness kind of falls apart and doesn't read quite as well.
Beautiful foliage and composition.
But it's something subtle. Yeah. Yeah.
This is definitely a very strong image.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
All right.
Oh, I didn't even realize it like goes farther back into the background too.
Yeah, it's massive. All right, I think we're on this one, Suntory. This is cool.
Yeah.
A little bit of a character concept more than anything. I like the idea. You have the construction there, but it's way too rough around the edges. Even if you're going for like a simple kind of portrayal on character, you want to get a little bit more cleanup, a little bit more cleanup in some of these
Yeah.
things,
It's
like the
like
material and.
it needs another polish pass, maybe two. Especially around the edges of the hourglass and stuff, it gets really choppy and like just kind of sketched in and not well defined in any way.
And this ellipse does not. All your ellipses need to be like perfect. People, art directors will call you out on shitty ellipses. Trust me, I know. So, bad experiences. Take it from me. Just get the ellipse tool. Make yourself a template. Get the ellipses right. Get them accurate. It's worth it. Um,
And
yeah.
I kind of want to see, because it's so monochromatic, which I don't mind, except like you have this brilliant thing on the staff, this brilliant yellow light. I kind of want to see that affect the things in the image more, especially the glass. Like the light on the glass is white, but the light would be coming
Yellow.
from that yellow staff. So you'd want those highlights on the glass to be brilliant and high saturation yellow, like the light source.
Reminds me of Justin's Sweet Stuff. All right, this is the last one. Adrian. This looks like the Adrian we usually see a bit more. Other Adrian. So they call it Adrian and other Adrian. So I have no idea. They'll let us know in the comments, I'm sure. Is that? This is cool. This is very dynamic. I like the colors and the light on this a lot. Like this image jumps out. Like this is cool.
Yeah, the shapes are really well designed and the contrast is really well designed. It's very graphic, but it has such an immediate read.
This looks really, really good, like from this angle. And what you're going to want to do, probably in most cases, is make it look really good like this. And that means you got to get in there and start getting subtlety with a lot of these forms, getting some nice neutrals and temperature shifts, and then just kind of cleaning up. This would look so beautiful, like really cleaned up and touched up. So some of it's very, very rough in some of the areas, like noticeably so. But the idea, the composition's beautiful.
The immediate impact is fantastic, but then like when you zoom in, there's not a lot for a second read. There's not a lot of like beautiful passages where the colors and light interact in interesting ways, where the edges are really interesting. You kind of get this samey, like the whole top half of the image, you kind of get this samey edge where everything's kind of scattered and foggy and soft. Whereas I think that the image is more interesting where you have the combinations of the hard edges and the soft edges in the lower half of the image. And so just pushing that further, like going in and paying attention to those little details will go a long way.
Yeah, I got no problem with the mood. It's now committing to these materials and cleaning all of that up. And I think you'll be fine. All right, I stopped. All right, we're back. We have our top contenders here. I think our favorite we both agreed on was Donnie's here with the face opening and the blue light. Our second favorite was the Vasco one here for its elegance and subtlety. And then our runner-up.
I just had a hard time picking between the first two. I feel like they're both, both on par. Those are fantastic paintings.
Our runner-ups was Alex's design here, and we also kind of picked that for Adam just because we wanted 3. There was over 30 of you, and Adam couldn't be here to help us finally decide. But Jessica and I both agreed on pretty much those 2 anyway. So great job, everybody. This has been fun. And following this, we'll talk about the next challenge and how things are going to change moving into 2020. So take care, everybody.
Bye.
Awesome. Hey guys, so the next challenge is going to be due, let's say, about February 1st. There's going to be a few keywords and situations to look for this one. The first is railways of the 19th century. So kind of just think about basically this general imagery that I kind of have up on screen now. locomotives, it could be stations, could be, anything that revolves around that, for that era. But the other parts of it would be mining. It has to integrate mining, integrate railway. The time, is generally about the same. Think about the setting or location stuff. It's going to be winter because we're in winter season, at least in the States. And prisoners is the last key word there. So utilize prisoners, mining, railway, winter, 19th century. Do your best to weave a narrative around all of those elements and to portray a cool shot that puts that research, puts that context on display. All right. So the next part, or the next bit of information that I'm going to talk about now, some people will like, some people are not going to like. But Adam, Jess, and I had a kind of mini little talk before this session, and we decided to change the format up a bit moving into 2020. We got to at least try it out because we don't like how we have to blaze through loads and loads of submissions, and a lot of people deserve more than that, and I have to rush people as we've seen today, and it's just kind of like very hectic and chaotic. So what we're going to do is anybody can enter, right? Anybody can submit. And once Tim gets me the list, what I'm going to do is send that to Jess and Adam. And we're each going to pick 10, that we feel like would be good candidates for review. And basically, we're going to put our votes on the whole stack. And the 10 that get the most votes are going to be the ones that we essentially critique. So we're going to boil it down to 10. And the goal with that, of course, it creates a little bit more competition in terms of the community aspect side of it. Like they have to, everyone's got to like work a little harder to make sure submissions feel more complete, more cohesive, which is good, for everybody. The next part is the benefit that we can bump basically 2 to 3 minute shot fire reviews up to 5 to 6 minutes to give the pieces, a little bit more time and attention, which we feel would just be a lot more beneficial because the people that didn't get picked can learn and piggyback up off that information that we can take a little more time to disclose with the chosen members. All right, so we're going to try that going into 2020. Everybody have a good or a great holiday and new year if I don't see you before then, and take care.